You are now tuning in to the Going North podcast with your host, best-selling author and professional speaker and member of the John Maxwell team, Dominic Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, we're going to hear the voice of a different author sharing their gifts, stories, and expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, we're bringing some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today is no different. Different. Heck, oh my kid, today is a different occasion. It's a special occasion. I got to thank the Special K for introducing me to this guy who's out in the Maryland area. So we got a Charm City bonus episode in the building. This is freaking sweet. Sweeter than cotton candy, sugar, honey, iced tea, and honey without the iced tea. Because my goodness, we got one heck of a treat for you today, folks. This guest today, a U.S. Navy captain and associate professor of surgery at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences and adjunct faculty at Howard University College of Medicine. And not only that, he was a Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellow from the 2012 to 2013 era. And the list just goes on and on. And on top of that, he's another TEDx speaker. And as you know, we've had quite a few TEDx speakers on this podcast. I stopped counting after 10. So my man's probably like the 33rd at this point. So let's give it up for my man himself, the hat himself, Dr. Hassan Tetteh. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing outstanding, Dom. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast and to share this time with your audience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, that's right. That's right. The good thing about this whole COVID crap is the fact that folks get to come out of hiding. It's like, hey, I got this podcast here. You ain't got no stage unless you want to wear a mask and be stuck in your snot for a few hours afterwards. So how about this podcast? Yeah, man. Yeah, bad joke indeed. But yeah, man. Yes, indeed. It's a pleasure to have you here, man, especially if I'm not mistaken. This is your latest book, The Art of Human Care, right?
That is correct. Yes, The Art of Human Care.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And the beautiful thing about it is this wasn't even your first entry into the business of immortality. I actually heard that you wrote your first book at the age of 12, man.
That's right. It was a small little book that I penned when I was just 12 years old. I entered it into, at the time, a Young Authors Festival and resurrected it actually after my TED Talk. So I was working with someone to work on that talk, and I was sharing a aspect of some of my clinical work, and he said, "Where did that come from?" And I said, "Oh, it's just something I thought of." He said, "No, there must be a deeper story behind it." It turned out I wrote this book about a crime fighter hero back when I was 12 years old, and the book was called Star Patrol. And he said, "That's it. You got to talk about that book." And so I went back and found it and got some my illustrations all together from that time, and to sort of see my 12-year-old self and what I wrote at that time. So definitely have matured quite a bit, and realized that when you're 12 years old and you think about what the future is going to be like, some things come to fruition and some things are totally different.
Oh, yeah, you can say that again. Heck, now you have a lovely little daughter who actually contributed to book number 5. So the generational wealth and creativity is still going.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was definitely a blessing to be able to do collaborative work with my daughter, and she drew the hearts in this book. I tell people that the art of human care is a sort of combination of many things in my life and my professional career, but it's a culmination of the cooperation between my daughter and myself, and she drew the hearts in the book, and I put the words to it, and we have some really great works of art in it. It's intentionally made to be a short book. It's a quick read, but if you count the pictures in it and say that each picture is worth 1,000 words, then it's a really long book. But it's one that I believe will touch the spirit and is quite handy in these times that we are now facing, these challenging times of COVID.
Heck yeah, man. And I love the title because I feel like because of it being election year, people are forgetting the fact that, hey, this is human life here we have if we're still alive, and we have to put that first and value people first as opposed to some darn political party or some other nonsense.
Well, I will say that, one of the things that has struck me throughout this time of COVID is that the crisis has hit close to home for us in many ways. My wife and I are both from a little town in New York, originally called Brooklyn. And so we, like many of those people that have been in New York and are in New York now, particularly during the sort of height of the crisis, if you will, suffered disproportionate losses. And we certainly had loved ones that succumbed to the pandemic. My wife lost two of our aunts, and I lost an uncle. We had many of our friends and family hospitalized. So it really hit close to home. And so when, even to this day, people look at these statistics now as we approach almost 200,000 people, those are 200,000 souls that are not with us anymore. And they were all with us when the year turned 2020. When you think about in that short period of time, how many people lost their lives from this, it's truly a devastating situation. As many of those people, and we experienced that, died alone in the hospital. They were going into hospitals and not allowed to have any family or friends visit with them. And during those times of solitude, they were suffering and sometimes, unfortunately, many times passed away without any of their loved ones even, by their side. And so it was a tragic time. And I think, we haven't even begun to really reconcile how that's going to impact us as a society moving forward.
Heck yeah, man. You can say that again. So, well, darn, tongue tied for a moment. Because I was about to say any advice for basically surviving through this time, but how have you and your family been able to really stay strong during these times? Because you're actually in the thick of everything, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm, obviously everything that I told you, notwithstanding, from a professional standpoint, my wife happens to be a nurse, and I'm a physician. And so you talk about impact and sort of seeing it front line and seeing it sort of up close and personal. That's definitely been the case. In terms of coping, I will say that this has been a really challenging time. I began the year, like many people, full of optimism. New decade, 2020, brand new book out. We had quite a bit of tours planned to promote and to tell the public and the world about our work. And shortly, thereafter, sort of early spring, and just like many people in March, when things started to get shut down and the pandemic was declared, and it really hit home for us, pretty much the world changed. And like many people, I think I was in a funk, just not being able to go out, being sequestered at home, again, having people and folks that are close to you passing away and suffering in the hospital and then ultimately dying by themselves. There was definitely a lot of grief. Then I sort of had this transition of perspective because I was seeing this devastating disease in the hospital, and realizing that we just really didn't have a good handle on how we should take care of people with COVID. I've said this before, and it's something that I continue to repeat. And it's the one thing that I know for sure about COVID as a healthcare provider, is that we don't know a lot about COVID. It's something that continues to evolve and challenge us. It remains an enigma in a lot of ways. And that perspective was also a very sobering one, because I was seeing patients, young, old, and everything in between, really succumb to this condition and deteriorate really rapidly, unlike anything that I'd seen before. And then with the grief and this perspective, there was just this frustration, the frustration of not having consensus among our populace that really took this as a serious condition. And I understand that was, and I understand it's largely because of just perspective and just exposure. There were many people in the country, even to this day, that just haven't, quite frankly, had a direct contact with anyone with COVID. They haven't been impacted by it personally, or even, even tangentially. And it's easy for some to just think, well, this is just something that's either made up or perhaps not really as serious as people are making it out to be. And I recognize that because I had spoke to some of my colleagues and friends that were in other parts of the country when New York was really being hit hard. And they were, very compassionate and well-educated, very aware individuals, good friends of mine that really just didn't understand why the whole country had to be in a lockdown and why we were insisting that people wear masks and didn't understand what the whole hubbub was about. And I realized if I put myself in their shoes, I totally could understand. One of my colleagues who was living in rural Oregon, really, really great guy. He just didn't understand because he had no one in his orbit that was impacted by this at all. But he would just watch on the news and see all this information and just couldn't understand what was happening. And that frustration really turned into a point in time and sort of a pivotal time to really answer your question succinctly of how to cope. Is that I found myself sort of in this, sort of dark place of despair because you had people like I said very close to me that passed away. I was frustrated because it wasn't something that everyone was appreciating as a problem, and then I had this perspective of seeing it on a daily basis. It was really challenging, and quite frankly I've got to a point where I said, if I continue down this path, it's not going to be healthy, not for myself, not for my family. And the thing that brought me hope and I think helped me to deal with it and cope, as you asked, is my book. I thought about the things that I wrote about in the book and the art of human care, which really came about as a culmination, as I mentioned, of my life experience and this really critical time that I had in my life where I almost died myself and was saved by, the medical system, the health system, and by, friends and family being supportive and coming up with a philosophy and a pillar of things that I think embody what real good healthcare should be and really what human care is all about. And it's about having a purpose. It's about personalizing the care for one person or an individual. And it's also about developing partnerships. And I realized those were the three foundational elements that were necessary to not only help me during this time and this crisis that we are now facing in COVID, but it was something that I probably needed to evangelize even with more vigor and enthusiasm during this time and share the tenet and the art of human care even with more enthusiasm during this period in time. And that's how I started to evolve out of it. And I just started to do some really concrete things like getting back into a habit and a routine, because it was really easy to devolve into, everything being like Groundhog Day and just kind of waking up and not doing anything, and just staying in your pajamas or staying in your sweatpants and, not even, paying attention to personal hygiene. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to wake up and act as if every day there's something to do and I have to go someplace. And that monotony for me was broken up in many ways because I had to go to the hospital at times to take care of patients, so that was very helpful. But I made it a point to say I'm going to wake up every morning, do daily hygiene. I'm going to get up, I'm going to start running again, I'm going to run daily and just get activated every day, and change and get put on regular clothes and get into a habitual routine that engages me with life again, and get out and engage with people and do that, whether it's by Zoom or whether it's email or it's calling people, but share the story about this great work that I think could be an inspiration to a lot of people, and that's the art of human care. And so that's how I've been coping. That's how I've been surviving, and that's how I've been more importantly thriving. I believe that being a student and a pupil of pandemics, and I've studied pandemics throughout my career. I've just always been fascinated by them, even before COVID hit us and struck us, because when you look over the course of human history, pandemics have hit society and the world over the centuries, and they happened typically every 80 to 100 years. There's a very big, you know, contagion, a virus, a bacteria, the bubonic plague, the black plague, the Spanish flu, all of these very sentinel events in human history that have really shaped and changed fundamentally society. And so when we hear this talk about let's return to normal, I try and evangelize and say to many that, you know, we will not return to normal. There is no returning back to the way things are. Your life as it was on March 10th of 2020 will not go back to being that way ever again because of what we are now going through. If you think about everything that has happened politically, economically, socially, even technologically, the fact that we're here sharing this time on a podcast is great, but it's happening more and more. And you know, my children, they're not attending school like the way they were before. And some people may never go back to having that same kind of instruction, particularly in the college, in the undergrad, in the graduate settings. So my thing is let's understand what's happening. Let's look back at the past and learn from it and recognize that we as a civilization and as a human race have survived these pandemics, and we've evolved and we've thrived, and in many ways we've actually come out ahead. And so it's with that kind of positivity I sort of look to the future of how we emerge from COVID. We're certainly not in a place where COVID is behind us. It's still with us. It's still among us. Even though we're reopening, I tell people all the time the virus has not got the memo. So even though, even though, even though we are opening and we're going back to trying to assume our lives and sort of restart and get back to how things were before, we must recognize that things will not necessarily ever be exactly as they were before. And what we are charged with individually, collectively, as a community, is to figure out a way to adapt, evolve, and emerge out of this situation better, stronger, and more equipped and able to move positively forward.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. That's a nice, good T-shirt idea, even though it's a temporary one. Is that the virus hasn't got the memo? It's like, wait, these folks out here again? Who out there? Oh, everybody? Oh, it's duck hunting season, baby. Come here, humans. I got you. So yeah, man, definitely gotta be careful with that. And thanks a bunch for your service too, man. Because I mean, being able to still remain alive and still serving your fellow human being through this time is definitely commendable indeed, and still having a positive attitude about it still, and still actually educating folks with the knowledge that you have out there is really something that we all need. And it's a good thing it's still out there fighting a good fight for us and keeping your metaphorical invisible sword out slaying the evil demons.
Indeed, indeed.
Uh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And then speaking of service, my goodness, my man wanted to be in Space Patrol in the future. Ended up being a doctor when that wasn't the original goal, and wanted to be an artist. But how'd you end up as a Navy captain, my man?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I wanted to join the Marines when I graduated from high school. At that point, I was pretty convinced I wanted to become a doctor, even at that young age. And I had a recruiter who was very persuasive and convincing that I could become a doctor in the Marines. And you know, now you know I know a lot better. And fortunately, my young 17-year-old mind at the time, because I was only 17 when I was graduating from high school, and I had to have my mother sign my documents to sort of enlist in the Marines, which she was willing to do because I was so convinced that that's what I wanted to do. I'd taken the ASVAB test, which is the military sort of battery test that you take to before you entry into the service. I also went to the local base there at that time was Fort Hamilton for me, and I took the physical exam, and you know, I was deemed ready and fit to serve, and I was just a pen stroke away from signing myself up to enlist in the Marines. And literally at that last moment, again, having that young 17-year-old mind, it says, I changed my mind. And, to the horror of the recruiter, because he was just devastated that I had changed my mind, I decided to go to college instead and kind of take the traditional path of going to med school. So I went to undergrad, I went to a small arts and science college in upstate New York. And then I had the opportunity, thankfully, to come back to my home little village of Brooklyn and go to downstate medical school. And while I was there, I really, got super interested in surgery and decided I was going to become a surgeon. And as I graduated from med school and was sticking around in the area for my surgical residency, I ran into a recruiter again. And this time, and this time I had a little bit more knowledge, but more importantly, I was already a physician. So it was really, really good situation and a place to be. And there was a program there that would allow me to get a little bit of income and potentially have an exciting opportunity and potentially see the world. And it was the Navy recruiter that got me this time. And I shared with that individual this experience that I had as a young lad in high school. And what really got me and hooked me was they said, well, if you become a Navy surgeon, you'll get to take care of the Marines. And I was like, oh, that's great. Sign me up. I'm all on board. And I thought at the time I would just do a few years and I would get out. Well, Dom, 22 years later, here I am, still in the Navy. And I've had sort of a whirlwind career. It's been very, very good. It's been unlike anything that I could have ever imagined that I would have ever had in terms of an adventure, in terms of being a rewarding experience, the camaraderie and the friends and the brothers and sisters that I've come to know and love while in the service, and the great things that I believe we've done and been a part of is definitely something that I would never imagined some 22 years ago when I signed up. And so that's kind of how it happened. And I've been around the world, literally. It's really true what they say about joining the Navy. You definitely will get a chance to see the world. I've been to over 54 countries, thanks to, in part, my service. And like I said, it's been unlike anything that I would have ever imagined as a career. So it's been a really rewarding and fulfilling experience.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about. And if I heard you correctly, you're still part of the Navy?
I am, yep.
Wow, dude, you get no sleep, do you?
It's a great thing, though.
Man, my goodness. And 22 years later, my goodness, my man's the champ, baby. That's what I'm talking about. My man's a living Iron Man match. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. Well, thank you once again for your service. That's what I'm talking about. My man doing double duty, baby. My man's like the sword hunter. My man's got a sword for every battle. That's right. Like, don't mess with this guy right here. The good doc will mess you up and then heal you up real good if you mess around. That's right. Oh my goodness. My man is like a jack of all trades, a jack of all trades. So since this is far from your first ever podcast, rodeo interview, metaphorically speaking, is there a question that you wish you'd be asked of more often when you're being on shows like these?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one of the questions that I'd like to have asked at times is, what is it that you've learned that can really be helpful to others? And I guess what I mean by that is, I think particularly folks that tune into podcasts and those that read and tune into guests when they're being interviewed, I think we are all as humans very curious and searching for something. And we're searching for, some pearl of wisdom, a bit of inspiration, some insight, and something that we can learn from, another person's experience, because we all are sort of individuals learning through life as you as you have it. And there are various degrees of success and failures and all these trials and tribulations that we all go through. And sometimes, just during a casual conversation, things come up and you evoke some of these really significant and important insights that I think are really helpful. But sometimes it's really hard to sort of ask that question and then have it come out in a way that, it just is really packaged in such a way that someone could say, aha, I have an aha moment. I got it. I get it. And I know whenever I'm listening to individuals that are getting interviewed and, particularly people that have written books and are sharing their sort of life's work in that way, or reading a book and sort of having it conveyed in a different way, I always look for that, bit of information, that insight, that takeaway, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Something that I could take away and say, I just learned something, and I have something in my toolkit that I could put in my quiver, and I could use that, to carry me forward. So yeah, that would be the thing that I hope always comes out when I'm in a podcast or when I'm being interviewed. And I don't know what the question is entirely of how to be asked that so that it comes out in a very organic way, besides maybe just asking it frankly. But yeah, that would be the thing that I would like to have always happen when I have a podcast interview or whenever I'm engaged with someone. So that should be a cliffhanger. So the question should be asked.
There you go. A magical cliffhanger indeed. That's right. Who needs a cliff notes? It's cliffhanger, baby. That's right. Dad joke indeed. Dad joke indeed. Well, yes, indeed. So since you're a busy man and a lot of folks nowadays probably have trouble managing their schedules and really staying afoot. So what really keeps you organized in everything that you do, especially as a physician and a Navy captain, as well as a husband and a father?
That's a good question. Well, there's a couple of things that I would say, just practical tools, and then probably I'll end with the one thing that I think would be a takeaway for the audience. But to answer the question, how I stay organized, I do just very basic things. I'm one of these list guys. Every morning I wake up and I have a list of things that I want to accomplish, and I prioritize those things. And I try my best the night before to even just draft out that list before even waking up in the morning, so that I can even think about how I'm going to attack those things. And like I said, I prioritize those things. I'm definitely a list person. Not many people are list people, but I'm a pen and paper list person. I'd like to write things down and say I need to accomplish A, B, and C today, and A has to be done. And if A doesn't get done, there's no rest. And I just make sure that that gets done. I try and prioritize things. That's definitely one thing that I do. One other very invaluable tool that helps me tremendously is meditation. And that is something that I discovered many years ago now, in particular after a very trying and challenging deployment that I had to Afghanistan, taking care of the Marines actually. And during that period of time, very devastating injuries that my team and I were taking care of for wounded warriors. And when I came back, I found myself in a very hard place in terms of dealing with that stress and that sort of post-trauma. And I discovered meditation was a very effective tool to help calm me and relax me and help keep me centered and focused. And it actually gives me time back in the day, and it helps me to mentally just visualize the things that I need to do. It helps me to organize my thoughts when I do take that time to meditate. And it's really been an effective and invaluable tool for me to accomplish a lot of things. And then the final thing I would say in terms of how to get a lot of things done and then kind of keep a positive spirit is having an evergreen sense of this one thing called gratitude. And I try and reflect daily on the things that I have that I should be grateful for and that I am grateful for: my family, my health, the fact that I'm able to talk to you and share this experience with your audience. And no matter how bad a day I have, I really try my best to really center on gratitude and being thankful for the things I have, because when one does that, you realize quickly that no matter how bad a day you think you're having, as long as you're above ground, that's a good thing. And there'll probably dozens, if not millions of people who would trade anything to be in your position, no matter how bad you think it is. And when you have that experience and you really center and focus on that, you really can appreciate, how lucky you are, and that's a good place to be. And so I really try and center that and make that a pivotal and a foundational exercise every day to just reflect on the things to be grateful for.
Oh, yeah. Evergreen gratitude. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Definitely some powerful tips right there, especially the listening, because that's really how things get done, especially in the beginning. And that, even if you keep it on your calendar too, along with the list, it's like, yeah, productivity machine right here. You can't stop this six pack of action. That's right. Yes, indeed. That's what I'm talking about. Solid tips right there. Never hesitate to show gratitude and keep it up. So we're coming down to the magical question here that everybody gets to receive, and that is if you're to wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but this time in 2020 with all of your amassed knowledge and experience, and there was no pandemic, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would say don't be afraid to fail. And I would give my 25-year-old self a little pep talk, and I would say be fearless and don't ever hesitate to pursue something that you want. Whether it be that young lady or that special person in your life you want to talk to, but you didn't have the courage to do that. If it's going out for a job or for an interview or taking a class that you think is going to be too hard, or trying to play guitar or learn how to draw, I'd say don't be afraid to fail and just have a can-do attitude about it. Because even at 25, as young and invisible as I thought I was, I know that I still held a lot of had a lot of fear and a lot of hesitation, had a lot of self-doubt. And with wisdom, well, let me put it this way: it's only through pain and suffering that you gain wisdom. And so my wisdom now is that, wow, I should have taken the risk and maybe learn from some of that pain and suffering, because I would have gained my wisdom faster and sooner. So that's what I would tell my 25-year-old self to do: be fearless and to just pursue those goals and those dreams and not have so much fear.
Woo! That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Because folks need that, and I'm pretty sure you got less fears nowadays. Because my man is out there on the daily, man. My man's out there on the daily. The combat never ends for my man right here, whether it's against the germs and the evil, or heck, even possibly on the battlefield or even in the Navy ship. So, for those who want to keep in magical contact with the good doctor himself, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Oh, my website's the best way. It's drtetteh.com. It's doctor spelled out DOCTORTETTEH. Of course, Twitter, also Dr. Tetteh, at Dr. Tetteh. And on LinkedIn as also Dr. Tetteh, Hassan Tetteh. And those are the great ways to reach out. I would love to connect with anybody that would like to, and always willing to share some insights and some thoughts, answer some questions if I can, and be of help and service.
Woohoo! My man, Dr. Tetteh, baby. Head over to that wonderful website. Check out his latest book, The Art of Human Care, baby, and keep a lookout because I know this ain't the end. My man's probably got another book cooking somewhere.
Yeah, we got a couple more right under the series of The Art of Human Care cooking. That's right. So you heard it here first. So The Art of Human Care for COVID-19 and The Art of Human Care in the Age of AI will be hitting bookshelves very soon.
Oh, shoot. Oh, dang. An AI for the artificial intelligence. Oh, shoot. All righty. All right. I got to snag me a copy of that one, shoot, because this artificial intelligence, my goodness, they're coming for us. They're coming for us. Well, and speaking of robots and the British robots coming for us, any parting words for the folks still listening?
Oh, I just want to say thank you, Don, for your kind invitation, hospitality to be allowed to share this time with your audience and yourself, and I really appreciate it.
This is your host, Don Brightman. Hope you enjoyed what you just heard. And if you really did, do me a solid and leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, wherever you're listening to. And subscribe to hear more because more is coming your way to advance you further than before.